I'm Alex Valtrades, and this is the Sunday Book Circle for The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates. The Water Dancer follows Hiram Walker, a slave in Virginia whose father is his owner and whose mother was a slave that was sold further south, whom Hiram does not remember. Hiram doesn't remember anything from the day his mother was sold, nor anything before that, even though he has a very precise memory. His father and owner ensures that Hiram is educated and plans to have him be his white son's manservant. Hiram, however, has a power beyond his control. This book is so boring. I got 2 chapters in before I realized there was no way I was ever going to finish it. Oh, thank fuck. The audiobook is read by Joe Morton. I love Joe Morton. I think he's one of the most underrated actors of today. But even with him reading the book to me, I had a hard time getting through it. I felt like celebrating when I reached the end. Why do I find this book to be such a slog? The prose. Coates is using such academic and stale diction and grammar that it feels as if the action is buried in a fog of elitism, not unlike the actual fog that so often forms in the setting of the novel. There are no interesting uses of verbs or grammatical structures. It's stiff and staid, a lot like books of another time. I believe it was done on purpose, but the purpose, most likely to elevate Hiram's appearance of intelligence and knowledge, while at the same time capturing the way in which prose was done in that time period, wasn't good enough to make the language suffer like that, and me along with it. Since this is a written account by Hiram, an argument could be made that this is just Hiram's voice. But I hate Hiram's voice. It's like a Twitter philosopher come to life trying to obfuscate their meaning on important ideas through the use of highbrow language and overly formal grammar to the point that I'm not even sure what Hiram did to bring about whatever happened to Georgie Parks. Thinking about this book to write this review, I am fighting the urge to phrase things in a similar way, and I think I'm failing. Get out of my head, Coates! Now this is turning into quite the crushing review. And some of you may be scratching your heads and thinking, but Oprah chose it for her book club. Oprah! Let me state this clearly. The Oprah Book Club is not an endorsement in my mind. In fact, that sticker is a warning sign of awful things to come. I'm not sure how anyone can take Oprah's book club seriously at this point. It is clearly a marketing scheme. It helps Oprah's image as an intellectual, and at the same time, she gets to promote books that she feels will sway an audience on social issues. But you just know that some committee is vetting the books before they even get to her. On top of that, the publishers lobby for the spots. They lobby for that sticker for books that they've not even published yet, because they know if their book gets a spot, that the book will sell like hotcakes upon release. Before the American Dirt fiasco of this year? That was this year? Fuck, 2020 has been long. In 2005, Oprah chose A Million Little Pieces, a novel masquerading as a memoir. As to who is responsible for that debacle, I'm not sure. But when it comes down to American Dirt, that's not on Janine Cummings. That's on her publisher, Oprah, and Oprah's team. Authors can write whatever they want, about whomever they want, as long as it's good. Because writing is always an act of empathy, and if it's not, then the writer is doing it wrong. While I haven't read American Dirt yet, when it comes to a powerhouse of marketing like the Oprah Book Club, there's not really any excuse for not finding a novel that wouldn't have been quite so inflammatory to the book-loving community. But the lobby was behind American Dirt, so that's what they went with. It's just that this time the marketing backfired. I keep seeing Oprah's new pic making the rounds on Twitter, and it makes me want to actively avoid the book because it's not a love of literature behind Oprah's book club. It's a love of money. I've had plenty of books, movies, and TV shows overcome my low expectations of them, so it's not as if the Oprah stamp made it impossible for me to love The Water Dancer. No, the novel accomplished that completely on its own. Recently, I started the Writers Against Woke Ideology Twitter account because I found that critical theory is the antithesis to empathetic writing, and to empathy in general. The American Dirt reaction is a good example of this. Better example is the reaction to My Dark Vanessa, which brought about the outing of Kate Elizabeth Russell's victimization. I also realized that critical race theory's hatred of interracial relationships was repugnant to me because if we cannot love freely, we cannot live freely. There is no comparison between the obvious rape of slaves by their owners and today's modern interracial relationship. Hiram's mother and Sophia were raped, again and again. There's no other way to phrase that. The water dancer handles these things well, and even looks at male slaves with censure for putting their pride above their love for the women in their lives that have been raped. When dealing with issues of victimization inherent in slavery, the pain of it, the water dancer does great things, especially when it comes to the female characters. But these are things we've seen before in other stories. Every once in a while, the water dancer deals in intersectionality, which as a theory sounds good on paper, but in practice has been severely limiting in empathy. One of the bigger reasons I'm against critical theory as it casts very specific people as always victims and others as always oppressors, meaning it invalidates the victimization or plight of real people, in fact a lot of people, simply because they don't fall into a happenstance demographic. I can never be okay with this, so I can't accept intersectionality in its current practice as used to erase the harm happening to millions of people. So seeing it in a novel has become repugnant. Chapter 20 was the most glaring example of critical theory, with the showcase of different forms it takes in order of the most moderate to the most extreme, with the abolishment of slavery being the best issue, but for some reason that made no sense to me. Free love was at the most extreme end, those on that soapbox promoting the abolishment of marriage. Honestly, free love is not an extreme idea, and I've never heard anyone say that because they will never get married, that the whole institution of marriage should be abolished. I've heard misandronists promote that idea. They don't actually believe in free love, because if they did, they wouldn't take such issue with a man and a woman loving each other. This part of the novel is painfully obvious in what it is doing, and pretty much just reaches propaganda levels. Only, I suppose, propaganda would be a little less overt? While the prose obfuscates action and scene, it doesn't shy away from telling the reader how they should feel about the subjects. I don't like pedantic fiction. Narratives should show action, setting, and emotion, and let the reader sort out how they feel about it. Uncle Tom's Cabin was pedantic, and it was painful reading that novel too. Both Uncle Tom's Cabin and The Water Dancer use vignette-style events to go over a specific way in which slavery is harmful, resulting in a less cohesive storyline and an obvious attempt at soapboxing. Though I don't remember anyone getting on an actual soapbox in Uncle Tom's Cabin. We can read Uncle Tom's Cabin and know that its importance is down to its social impact when it came out. Slavery was still happening when it was published, so it is a novel attempting to get society to see slavery as bad. What is The Water Dancer trying to do? It's obviously trying to do something. Is it trying to rewrite Uncle Tom's Cabin from a more authentic viewpoint? If so, it's not working because Coates was never a slave in the US. It's not as if racism or slavery can't be done well in fiction. They can. In fact, they're such heavy subjects, a writer has to work less to make a reader empathetic to the characters. So on the surface of things, Hiram, Sophia, Thina, and all the rest are easy to empathize with. But Coates spends so much time on esoterica and parable making through the lens of critical race theory that it makes it harder to identify with them. Which makes no sense, because I literally have an insane memory, like Hiram, and almost no memory before the age of 8, like Hiram. There aren't a lot of people with that experience. Much of the on-paper details of The Water Dancer sound great. A man in slavery with a power and an amazing memory in search of the memory of his mother and freedom. But so much goes wrong with the crafting of this novel. It's the style, it's the theory upon which it has been built, it's the tone of arrogance over the reader. It has shining moments of brilliance, which shows me why people want to love it. Most of those having to do with Sophia, Thina, and Kessia, but they are few and far between. The novel could have been half as long and had more impact on the reader if the pedantry had been cut. The novel also seemed to circle the same subjects multiple times, such as the unfairness of Maynard being white and thus the inheritor of Loch Ness, but too selfish and too stupid to handle the responsibility well, while Hiram was far more intelligent and able to manage a place like Loch Ness, but couldn't because he was a slave. This subject continued to come up long after Maynard was no longer in the novel. Like, yeah, we get it. It's unfair. Why did this even have to be stated by Hiram at all? Most readers are intelligent enough to see the unfairness of this situation without it boldly told to us. And that's what I mean by arrogance, the arrogance that the reader is less intelligent than the writer. I believe readers of novels are intelligent, sometimes more intelligent than the authors, so this kind of thing pisses me off. Two choices of plotting bothered me as a writer in The Water Dancer. The novel starts with Hiram driving Maynard in a cart from the town of Starfall to Lockless, but after that chapter it jumps to when Hiram was a child, then leads back up to the aftermath of that trip from town. Why tell it out of order like this? I don't believe it really added anything to the novel to do so. The second one was when Hiram has to run for his life every night, but the beginning of the chapter starts with a story of how Hiram injured his ankle when he was younger, because that injury was going to be important in him running for his life in this specific chapter. No other chapter is Hiram's movement affected by this injury before or after this chapter. It's like Coates wanted to have Hiram's ankle give out, but remembered he needed to give a reason for it, so he added the story to the beginning of the chapter. It could have been shown earlier in the novel, as the novel covers much of Hiram's boyhood and teenage years before this moment. This is something another draft could have fixed easily. It was glaring in its 20 inclusion within the same chapter. I've not really talked about spoilers because I don't really feel the need to. Nothing in the later plot of the novel really stands out as being important enough for me to talk about, in that it was amazing or awful. The plot is mostly meandering, and it took far too long to really figure out what I was waiting for, so that by the time I did figure it out, I didn't care anymore. I honestly just wanted it to be over. I know some people love this novel and this author. I'm searching for a reason why, and thought maybe his other novels are better, but a quick peek at Goodreads shows me he's not really a novelist, but more of a journalist, which these days means he's most likely an activist who writes. Am I being harsh? Yeah, probably. But I didn't start Writers Against Woke Ideology for nothing. I do think Coates has potential as a novelist. His female characters were so real and awesome, but he needs to step away from the teaching podium when he comes to the page. He does this with Hiram's very negative and uncharitable view of white abolitionists. Instead of believing they are capable of thinking slavery is wrong for the disservice and harm it causes humanity, especially to those under its yoke, he believes they are against it because of the stain it leaves on their own humanity, with really no evidence to support such a claim. Political subjects are hard to avoid pedantry with, especially if a writer has critical theory distorting how they see the world and the act of writing. I know the phrase "get woke, go broke" has been making the rounds, but I'm not sure that the axiom works in the book world. Many readers are pro-woke ideology, willing to throw away a writer they love for not following the very shaky tightrope critical theory demands they balance on. My hope is that this is changing. I also hope that writers remember that empathy is the pinnacle of writing, the foundation upon which it all rests. We cannot come to the page without it, and not just for our characters, but for our readers as well. Critical theory does not promote empathy. It promotes the segregation of peoples, which makes empathy harder. Coates at times shows he's capable of great empathy for even his worst characters. I'm not sure if I could read another novel by him, however, but I will check out his forays into comic books. But what did you think of The Water Dancer? Did you love it? Hate it? What about it did you love? What about it did you think I got wrong? You're free to disagree with me. That's part of why I'm fighting woke ideology, so we can disagree without hatred and anger. Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and please mark all spoilers. Would you like to see what I'm currently reading? Follow me on goodreads.com/AlexVolTrades to see what I'm reading right now and what book reviews you can expect in the future. I've made a Discord. I'm on it all the time and you're all invited to chat with me. There are channels for video games, movies, TV shows, books, and writing. Even a place for you to promote your own things. Join me there. Everyone is welcome. Merch, 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 merch. Yeah. Check out my new shop at cafepress.com/AlexVolTrades for all kinds of products with my face on them.